Hello, and welcome to the Sleepless Scientist. Tonight we'll explore a curious possibility that you are already living in the afterlife without even knowing it. Across ancient traditions, modern neuroscience, near-death studies, and even quantum thought experiments, there runs a thread that daily life may itself be a shadow world, an in-between space where consciousness learns, forgets, and remembers again. If these journeys bring you peace, you're welcome to like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you are and what time it is for you. It feels like stars across one sky, each glowing in its own corner. So dim the lights, let the world soften, and let's begin. If your thoughts drift, don't worry. We'll still be here, waiting, like a quiet current that carries you gently forward. When you open your eyes in the morning, there is a brief instant when you are not entirely sure where you are. The light has changed since the last time you looked at the world. The dream still lingers like a fragrance in the air, and for a moment you are between worlds. Some mornings the transition is smooth, like stepping from one room to another. Other times there is a jolt, a small confusion, the sense that you are arriving late into a conversation you were having with yourself all night. In that in-between moment, you are not quite dreaming, not quite awake, and if you listen to Tibetan traditions, you might recognize that you are touching the Bardo, a state of transition that is not reserved only for death, but woven into life itself. The Bardo is often described in the Tibetan Book of the Dead as the realm between death and rebirth, a place of shifting visions and strange clarity. Yet Tibetan teachers remind us that Bardo simply means in between. Every time you drift from waking to sleeping, from sleeping to waking, from certainty to uncertainty, you pass through Bardos. Daily life itself, they suggest, is one long Bardo, a wandering stage where consciousness stumbles, dazzled by its own lights, failing to recognize its true nature. In the accounts, the departed soul sees luminous displays, sounds, colours, figures, yet fails to realize they are projections of its own mind. Fear rises, confusion deepens, and the soul clings to illusions as if they were solid. Only those who recognize the play of their own awareness can pass through freely. If that seems remote, consider the last time you woke from a vivid dream. Perhaps you dreamed you were running late for school, or trapped in an exam you had never studied for. In the dream, your heart raced, your palms sweated, your mind was convinced it was real. Then you woke up, safe in bed, and laughed at how completely your mind had believed the illusion. The Bardo, Tibetans say, is like that, but so is daily waking life. We believe our fears, our regrets, our frantic schedules are absolute. Yet from a wider vantage they may be only shadows flickering on the wall of consciousness. Imagine walking through a misty valley at dawn. Shapes loom in the fog, perhaps a tree, perhaps a person. For a moment you are uncertain. If you panic you might see monsters. If you pause and breathe, the fog lifts and you recognize a harmless oak tree standing quietly. The Bardo is this moment of uncertainty multiplied, the mind's own projections painting the fog with dazzling colours, and the everyday world with its constant rush of perceptions and emotions is also a fog we mistake for bedrock. The Tibetan approach is not to condemn this fog but to train in recognition. Through meditation, they practice noticing thoughts the way one notices clouds passing in a wide sky. The cloud may seem threatening, but the sky remains open. In life, this recognition is like realizing you are in a dream while still dreaming. Instead of panic, there can be calm curiosity. Instead of being tossed, you float. Some teachers even describe the most advanced practice as waking up twice. Once into ordinary life, once into awareness itself. Now pause for a moment and consider your own experience. When you are anxious, it feels as though the anxiety is the whole of reality. But if you step back, if you watch your breath or let your shoulders relax, the anxiety becomes a passing state. It is not the true ground, just a wave upon it. This is the heart of the Bardo teaching. If you can recognize the nature of mind in the middle of the storm, then even death itself can be crossed like a quiet river. The connection to afterlife is striking. If life is itself a Bardo, then we are already in the afterlife, or at least in a rehearsal for it. The judgments, the visions, the choices, these are happening every day in smaller forms. When you snap at a loved one and later feel regret, that is a kind of miniature life review. When you cling to a mistake from years ago as if it were still happening, that is a ghost haunting your present. When you release an old hurt, suddenly feeling lighter, that is like liberation from a karmic chain. To make this gentler, let us borrow an everyday comparison. Think of an email inbox that you never clear. Old messages pile up. Some are urgent, some are irrelevant, some are mistakes. Yet each morning, you open the inbox and feel the weight of it all as if it were current. Now imagine you discover the archive button. You do not need to reread every old message, you simply recognize that they are no longer living conversations. By archiving them, you free the present. The practice of recognition in the Bardo and in daily life is much the same, learning to see which thoughts are present reality and which are only echoes. Tibetan imagery often speaks of dazzling lights that frighten the soul. The gentle, bright lights are said to be the true nature of mind, but the soul, unprepared, flees toward the dimmer, softer lights that feel more familiar. That choice between blinding clarity and comfortable illusion plays out in our waking lives too. When faced with truth that unsettles us, we may prefer the smaller, gentler lie. We scroll through social feeds instead of facing loneliness. We turn to distraction instead of silence. In these choices, we repeat the Bardo pattern, mistaking shadows for safe havens. Yet the teaching is not heavy. It whispers. If you can learn to recognize the luminous in daily life, then when the final Bardo comes, you will already know how to walk in it. Each sunrise is a rehearsal. Each dream is a preview. Each pause of breath is a miniature gate. The veil is thinner than we think, woven not from distance but from attention. So tonight, as you listen, perhaps let your own day soften into Bardo perspective. The confusions and triumphs, the lists and memories can be seen as projections in the fog. You do not need to push them away. You need only recognize this too is the mind's display. Behind it, the open sky remains. And if that is true, then maybe, just maybe, you're not waiting for an afterlife to begin. You're already living in its gentle corridor, learning how to wake inside it. If you close your eyes and picture ancient Egypt, perhaps you see temples rising out of desert sands, walls carved with figures of gods and pharaohs, boats gliding on the Nile under a sun that has barely changed in 5,000 years. For the Egyptians, the world of stone and water was only half the story. They believed that what we call everyday life was more like a shadow theatre, and that the true journey began in the Duat, the mysterious realm of the dead. The Duat was not a simple place of reward or punishment. It was a landscape as intricate as life itself, rivers of fire, gates guarded by serpents, halls where the heart was weighed against the feather of truth. Yet the Egyptians spoke of earthly life as shadows compared to the deeper, brighter existence awaiting beyond. The hieroglyphs themselves often showed this contrast, figures outlined sharply against the wall, as if to remind us that what we see here is only a silhouette cast by a greater flame. In a way, it is a picture not so different from the one offered centuries later by Plato in Greece. In his famous allegory of the cave, human beings are imagined as prisoners chained in darkness, able to see only shadows flickering on the wall. They mistake these shadows for reality, because they have never seen the fire behind them, never glimpsed the world outside. When one prisoner is freed and stumbles out into the light, the true world at first blinds him, then overwhelms him with its beauty. He realizes that all the years he spent studying shadows were only the faintest hints of what truly exists. The Egyptians spoke of life as shadows. Plato spoke of life as shadows, and in both cases the message is clear. What we take for solid reality may in fact be the dim outline of something more fundamental. The afterlife, the sunlight outside the cave, the hidden fire, all suggest a deeper dimension of existence that is present all along yet unnoticed. If you pause here and think about your own daily routine, the parallels become gentle but unmistakable. How often do we mistake the shadow for the substance? We may scroll through an endless stream of images online, convinced that these fragments define who we are, when in fact they are only silhouettes of real presence. We may mistake the outline of someone's words for the whole of their heart, forgetting that beneath every phrase lies a story we cannot see. Life is full of shadows, and yet the shadows hint at the presence of light. The philosopher John Wheeler, centuries after Plato, expressed something similar in modern language. Wheeler proposed the idea of it from bit, that physical reality, the its we see and touch, may ultimately arise from informational choices, from bits. In other words, the universe itself may be like a grand projection, where what feels solid is the outcome of information being processed at a deeper level. From Plato's cave wall to Wheeler's informational universe, the theme continues. Appearances are not the whole story, and what seems substantial may be woven from unseen threads. To make this less abstract, imagine watching a movie in a darkened theatre. On the screen you see cities, oceans, faces laughing or crying. You feel suspense, joy, sorrow. The images grip you, and for 2 hours you're convinced they're real. Yet all the while, behind you, a projector is shining patterns of light and shadow through reels of film or streams of digital code. The story feels real because the shadows on the screen are so convincing, but the source is elsewhere. Plato would say, life is the movie and truth is the projector. Wheeler would say, life is the screen and truth is the code of information generating it. The Egyptians added another twist. In their view, the test of the afterlife was whether you recognised the shadow nature of earthly deeds and carried a heart light enough to float against the feather of truth. Heavy hearts burdened by denial or cruelty sank in the scales. Light hearts, unencumbered, rose to the next horizon. The shadows of life could weigh you down if you mistook them for reality, or they could become lessons, fading into the greater brightness of awakening. Think of times when you mistook an outline for the whole. Perhaps you judge someone by a single glance, a single mistake, only to discover later that the real person was far more complex, far more luminous than you realised. The shadow was convincing but not complete. Or recall moments when you chased after appearances, possessions, status, a fleeting compliment, believing they were solid, only to find them vanish like the outlines in Plato's cave. The lesson of both Egypt and Greece is not despair but humility. Remember that what you see may be a silhouette, and keep searching for the flame behind it. There is a quiet comfort in this. If life is shadow play, then our struggles, though real in feeling, may be less absolute than they appear. Just as nightmare dissolves at dawn, or a frightening shadow in a room becomes a coat hanging harmlessly on a chair when the light is switched on, our darkest moments may be outlines waiting to be reinterpreted. The afterlife, then, is not only a destination beyond death, but also a shift of perspective available at any moment. To awaken now is to glimpse the projector behind the film, the fire behind the shadows, the light behind the outlines. Perhaps this is why so many traditions emphasize practice in the present. The Tibetans speak of recognition in the Bardo. The Egyptians spoke of living with a heart light enough to rise. Plato spoke of the arduous but rewarding climb out of the cave. Wheeler spoke of a universe shaped by choices of observation. Each, in its own language, reminds us that what we call ordinary life may already be an afterlife in disguise, a corridor of shadows designed not to imprison us, but to encourage us to seek the light. So tonight, as you listen, notice the shadows around you, the soft shape of furniture in dim light, the faint images that pass across your mind. They are not final, not fixed. They are hints, silhouettes, invitations, and perhaps in recognizing them, you are already practicing the art of awakening, the art of living in the afterlife knowingly. In the quiet corners of early Christianity, long before creeds were fixed and churches were built of stone, there were groups of seekers who spoke of a mystery not often taught openly. In the writings now called the Gnostic Gospels, salvation was not only about what happens after the body falls away, it was also about what happens here and now, when a person awakens to the true nature of reality. They spoke of something called resurrection while alive. To be raised from the dead did not simply mean to rise at the end of days. It meant to see through the illusions of the world, even while you walked among them, to wake while others still dream. For the Gnostics, the world as we normally perceive it was not the final truth, but a kind of veil maintained by forces they called the archons. These archons were like gatekeepers of the shadow world, keeping souls distracted by appearances, turning their attention toward possessions, quarrels and fears, and away from the light at the centre of their being. The stories vary, sometimes poetic, sometimes mythic. The essence is clear. Human beings forget what they are. They mistake the shadows for the whole of existence, and in doing so, they remain asleep. Resurrection, then, was not about waiting for a trumpet in the sky. It was about awakening now, shaking off the dream, recognizing the luminous within. If that sounds strange, think of how easily we accept filters as reality. You take a picture on your phone, apply a filter, and suddenly the colours shift. The shadows soften, the lines sharpen. The image may look more flattering, more dramatic, but it is no longer what the eye would see directly. Spend long enough in filtered images, and you may forget what unfiltered light looks like. According to the Gnostics, life is like that. We live behind filters laid over reality. The archons were not necessarily monsters lurking in the sky, but symbols of the subtle forces, fear, pride, distraction, that keep the filter in place. To wake is to swipe the filter away and glimpse unfiltered light. Other traditions say the same in different language. Buddhism calls it ignorance, the failure to recognize the mind's nature. Hindu thought calls it Maya, the grand illusion that covers the eternal. Modern psychology might call it cognitive bias, the way the mind edits reality to fit its expectations. In each case, we are reminded that what we experience is not raw reality, but a shaped version, a rendering like shadows on a wall. The invitation of the Gnostic teachers was startling in its intimacy. Do not wait for death to discover the truth. Wake now. Let resurrection happen in your present breath, in your seeing of the world as it truly is. It was a message not of escape but of immediacy. The afterlife, they said, is already here. We are the ones who sleep through it. Perhaps you have felt a moment like this. Walking down a familiar street, you suddenly stop, noticing the way light pools on the pavement, the way a tree's leaves shimmer with patterns you have never really seen before. The street is the same, yet it feels entirely new, as if another layer has been lifted. For a few seconds, life feels luminous. That is a taste of resurrection while alive. Nothing external changed. The veil thinned within you. Plato's cave returns here as well, but with a twist. Imagine that the chains fall away, not after death, but in the middle of an ordinary afternoon. You rise, blinking, and see the fire behind the shadows. You step into the light while your companions still argue over which shadow looks strongest. To the Gnostics, this was the real meaning of rising from the dead. To cease being among the sleepwalkers, to live awake in the middle of the shadow play. Science, surprisingly, brushes against this idea too. Neuroscientists remind us that the brain constructs a model of reality. We never experience the raw world directly. We experience what the brain presents to us, stitched together from signals, memories, and expectations. Psychologists studying inattentional blindness show how easily we miss what is in plain sight when our attention is fixed elsewhere. In this sense, the archons are still with us, not as cosmic jailers, but as the limits of our own perception. And yet, resurrection while alive suggests we can slip through these limits. Meditation quiets the inner noise. Lucid dreaming reveals how thoughts shape entire environments. Psychedelic research hints at states where the usual boundaries dissolve, giving glimpses of connectedness beyond the self. These may be modern echoes of what the Gnostics pointed toward, moments when the filter thins, the shadows lighten, and a broader reality pours through. Everyday life is full of gentle rehearsals, a child discovering that a magician's trick was only sleight of hand, a student realizing that an exam once feared as catastrophic was just one step in a larger story, a parent seeing that what mattered was not the polished house but the laughter of the children inside. Each of these is a tiny resurrection, a step out of the grave of illusion into the air of recognition. The phrase, resurrection while alive, may sound lofty, but in practice it can be as simple as pausing. When anger surges, pausing to ask, what is this really? When desire pushes, pausing to see whether the object is a shadow or substance. Each pause is like lifting a filter, glimpsing light through the archon's mask. In that glimpse you are already awake. So as you drift tonight, perhaps let the phrase rest gently in your thoughts. Resurrection is not only a far-off promise, but a present possibility. To wake inside the dream of life, to recognize the shadows as shadows, to feel the veil thin while your heart beats in your chest. That is to live in the afterlife knowingly. You do not have to wait for the world to end. The awakening can begin with the next breath, the next step, the next moment you see through the filter and recognize the light already shining. When you look at your phone or computer screen, you see icons, a blue envelope for email, a little trash bin for deleting files, a bright triangle for playing a song. Each one is simple, clear and easy to use, yet none of them shows you the real machinery underneath. The trash bin icon does not contain circuits, wires, or the magnetic fields that store information on a disk. The blue envelope does not resemble the vast networks of fibre optic cables and wireless signals carrying messages across the world. The icons are not meant to be true. They are meant to be useful. They allow you to survive in the digital environment without being overwhelmed by its invisible complexity. This is the metaphor used by cognitive scientist Donald Hoffman to describe our perception of reality itself. According to his interface theory of perception, evolution did not shape our senses to reveal the truth of the world. It shaped them to keep us alive. Creatures that saw reality as it truly is, dense with quantum fields, molecules and probabilities, would be too slow, too confused to survive long enough to pass on their genes. Instead, we evolved a simplified interface, icons of colour, shape, sound and taste that guide us to food, to safety, to mates, to survival. Just as a red warning sign does not need to show the chemical composition of paint, it only needs to signal danger quickly and effectively. Imagine standing at a crosswalk. The light changes to red and you stop. You do not need to know the voltage running through the circuitry of the traffic system, the engineering of the bulbs, the mathematics of alternating current. All you need is the icon. Red means stop. Green means go. Useful, not truthful. That is how our senses may operate. If this is true, then the world we inhabit each day is not the ultimate reality, but a user interface. Trees, chairs, clouds, even our own bodies. These may be icons designed to keep us functioning, not faithful portraits of what exists underneath. Life itself may be a carefully designed desktop, hiding the complexity of the operating system beneath. This is a disconcerting thought, but it is also oddly comforting. It suggests that the gap between what ancient traditions called the veil and what science calls perception is narrower than we might think. The Tibetans said life is a bardo, a realm of projections. The Egyptians said life is shadows. The Gnostic said life is a filtered world maintained by archons. Hoffman says life is an interface. Each in its own language points to the same possibility. What you see is not what ultimately is. Everyday life provides examples that echo this idea. Consider food. You look at a strawberry and see red, taste sweet, feel soft. But physics tells us the strawberry is not inherently red. Red is a perception created when certain wavelengths of light bounce from its surface and strike your eyes. Sweetness is not in the fruit itself, but in the way your tongue's receptors respond to molecules of sugar. Softness is not in the strawberry, but in the nerve signals generated when your fingers press against it. The strawberry as you experience it is an icon, bright, sweet, soft. Behind it lies something stranger, a structure of atoms and fields that you will never taste or see directly. This does not mean the strawberry is an illusion in the sense of being unreal. It means that what you experience is the interface version, simplified for your survival. You know enough to eat it, enjoy it, share it, plant it. You do not need to know the deeper code that allows it to exist. The same principle applies to nearly everything. Sound is pressure waves in air translated by your ears into the sensation of tone and music. Colour is electromagnetic frequency translated by your eyes into hues of blue, green and gold. Even the solid feel of a table is mostly empty space between nuclei and electrons. Yet our interface translates it into something firm and dependable. Evolution has built us a world of icons, smooth, coherent and comprehensible. Hoffman argues that this is not just convenient but necessary. In experiments and simulations, creatures that evolve to perceive only truth, but not usefulness, are outcompeted by creatures that perceive useful icons even if inaccurate. The truthful creatures waste time on details. The useful creatures survive. So evolution does not reward truth, it rewards fitness. That is why our senses may hide more than they reveal. What does this mean for the idea that we may already be living in an afterlife-like state? It means that daily life itself may be a kind of interface, a simplified classroom designed not to show us the machinery of the cosmos, but to help us learn how to live, how to love, how to make choices. Just as your computer desktop hides circuits so that you can write a letter or compose a song without being an engineer, the world may hide its deeper code so that you can focus on the lesson at hand. Think of a child learning to read. At first, the book is filled with simple pictures, cartoon cats and dogs, bright colours and large letters. The child does not yet see the deeper grammar, the history of language, the vast library of literature behind those simple pages. But the simple pages are not a mistake. They are the interface that allows the child to begin. Perhaps our lives are like that. The world of tables, trees, clouds and conversations may be the picture book version of reality, training us for something larger. This is not to say that reality is false. The icons work. The red light stops cars, the strawberry nourishes, the table holds your cup of tea. But beneath the icons may be something stranger and richer than we can imagine, and if death is the closing of one interface, it may be the opening of another. What feels like afterlife may be less a leap into nothingness, and more like stepping behind the icons into a deeper operating system. So as you listen tonight, look around your room, the lamp glowing softly, the blanket warming your shoulders, the phone or speaker carrying this voice. Each of these may be icons, simplified images that hide far more than they reveal. They are shadows, filters, interfaces. But they are also bridges. They keep you alive, safe, and learning. Perhaps one day you will look back and see that life itself was a desktop screen, and that all along you were already in an afterlife classroom, guided not by the truth of appearances, but by their usefulness in helping you wake. Imagine you're playing a video game. The world on the screen looks vast, filled with forests, cities, oceans and skies. Yet behind the scenes, the computer is not rendering every detail at once. The processor generates only the part of the world you're looking at, the path your character walks, the tree you stand beside, the house you enter. If you turn away, the forest behind you vanishes into code waiting to be called into view again. The illusion of a complete world is maintained, but the reality is selective. It is created as you interact with it. Something similar happens in one of the most puzzling experiments in physics, the delayed choice experiment. Its roots go back to the famous double-slit experiment, where light behaves like both particle and wave, depending on how you observe it. When photons are not measured, they spread like ripples across a pond, creating an interference pattern of overlapping waves. But when you set up a detector to measure which slit the photon goes through, the wave-like pattern disappears. The photon behaves like a single particle, as if it decides on a path only when observed. John Wheeler, the physicist who extended this idea, proposed the delayed choice version. In this setup, the decision of whether to measure the photon or not can be made after the photon has already passed the slits. Astonishingly, the photon still behaves in a way that matches the later choice. It is as though the universe does not commit to a history until an observation requires it. The past itself seems flexible, shaped by how the present interacts with it. For most of us, the equations and apparatus of quantum physics are difficult to grasp, yet the implications can be understood with gentle metaphors. The universe may be less like a fixed painting, and more like a responsive screen. Reality may not render every tree and stone in advance. Instead, it may generate them when consciousness turns its attention toward them, the way a video game loads a new scene only when your character walks there. This does not mean that reality is fake, or that it can be bent at will like a fantasy story. It means that the connection between observer and observed is more intimate than we once thought. The cosmos seems to invite participation. The photon is not independent of the experimenter. The universe is not wholly separate from the consciousness looking at it. If this sounds abstract, think about everyday life. You open a book and enter a story, yet the pages only come alive as your eyes move across them. You look at the sky at night and see constellations, but the stars were shining long before, unseen, unarranged, until your mind traced them into patterns. A moment of attention brings the world into being in a specific form, and the form remains unseen when attention drifts away. Wheeler once said, "The universe does not exist out there independent of us. We are inescapably part of the whole." He used the phrase participatory universe. This suggests that the cosmos is less like a stage on which we are actors, and more like a conversation, where each observation is a word spoken, each act of attention a ripple that shapes what follows. How does this connect to the theme of the afterlife? If life itself is already a Bardo, an in-between space of projections and lessons, then the participatory nature of reality is part of that design. We are not passive recipients of a finished world. We are co-creators, shaping the shadows and lights with our focus, our choices, our awareness. In this sense, life may already be the afterlife classroom, not a fixed place we endure, but a responsive environment we help generate. Consider how this works in your own mind. When you focus on gratitude, the world seems brighter, friendlier. When you dwell on fear, the same room feels smaller, darker, threatening. The objects have not changed, but the reality you inhabit has shifted. Attention is the lens that renders the world in one way or another. Just as in the quantum experiment, the outcome depends on the act of observation. Even memory behaves like this. When you recall a childhood moment, you do not retrieve a perfect recording. You reconstruct it each time, adding and altering details, shaped by the mood of the present. The past, like the photon's path, is flexible. It waits for the present to choose how it will be seen. The video game analogy returns here with even more resonance. Imagine that your life is such a game, and that every choice of attention calls new scenery into being. Sometimes the landscapes are beautiful, sometimes they are difficult, but all are opportunities to learn. The game is not meant to deceive, but to teach. The hidden code is less important than the choices you make while the scene is before you. It is tempting to dismiss this as fanciful, but even in physics the message remains. Reality is not entirely separate from the act of perception. If the world renders as needed, then the veil between life and afterlife may be thinner than we. Think, the same participatory principle may continue beyond death, with consciousness encountering realms shaped by its focus, its expectations, its clarity or confusion. Near-death experiences often describe environments that respond instantly to thought, luminous worlds that seem more real than this one. Perhaps these are not alien dimensions, but natural continuations of the participatory universe. So tonight, as you rest, consider this. The room around you may be more like a responsive canvas than a fixed stage. The lamp glows, the shadows fall, the voice carries through the air, but all of it may be icons rendered by a deeper system, called forth by the simple act of awareness. Life itself may be a quantum window, opening not only onto this world but onto the possibility that we are already in the afterlife, co-creating the lessons we're here to learn. There are moments when the body appears to stop, when the brain falls silent, and yet awareness seems to continue. These are the moments described in near-death experiences, or NDES. For centuries they were whispered in private, dismissed as dreams or hallucinations, but in recent decades, physicians and researchers have begun to collect them carefully, studying thousands of accounts, and what they reveal is strangely consistent across cultures, ages, and circumstances. People who have been declared clinically dead, hearts stopped, no measurable brain activity, sometimes return with vivid stories. They describe floating above their bodies, watching doctors and nurses working frantically below. They recount details that they could not have known, instruments used, words spoken, even objects located outside their field of view. When checked, some of these reports prove accurate. The boundary between life and death, once thought absolute, begins to blur. One of the most striking features of NDES is the sense of hyperreality. Survivors say the experience felt more real than real. Colours were brighter, sounds more resonant, emotions more immediate. Time seemed to stretch or dissolve entirely. Communication did not require words. Thoughts and feelings flowed directly. In one account, a man described standing in a light so brilliant it should have blinded him, yet instead it filled him with peace. Another spoke of reviewing his life in a panoramic sweep, feeling not only what he had done but how his actions had touched others, both in joy and in pain. Researchers like Pim van Lommel in the Netherlands, Sam Parnia in the United States, and Raymond Moody, who first popularised the term near-death experience, have documented these patterns with careful attention. Neuroscientists often propose explanations, perhaps chemicals released in a dying brain, or hallucinations caused by lack of oxygen. Yet the clarity, structure, and verifiable details of some experiences make them difficult to reduce to simple biology. When a patient describes a surgical tool used while they had no heartbeat, or recalls a conversation that occurred while they were unconscious, the question lingers: how could they have known? The stories themselves are often told with remarkable calm, as though the experience carried its own stillness. A woman in cardiac arrest described drifting toward a tunnel of light and being met by figures she identified as family who had passed years earlier. She spoke of them not as ghosts, but as radiant presences, welcoming her without words. Another patient, a child, recalled being comforted by a gentle figure who assured him he would return. He awoke in the hospital, tubes attached, his body frail, but with a memory more vivid than any dream he had ever had. Beyond the content of the experiences, researchers have noted their after-effects. People who undergo NDES often change in lasting ways. They report a reduced fear of death, as though the boundary has already been crossed once and found not to be an end. Many develop a stronger sense of compassion, a desire to live more kindly, as though the memory of the life review has left an imprint on their choices. Others speak of synchronicities, meaningful coincidences that seem to guide their lives afterward. It is as though touching the edge of consciousness reshapes the centre of daily living. To make this gentler, imagine standing at the edge of a lake at dusk. You expect the water to be cold, dark, perhaps frightening. Yet when you dip your hand in, the water is unexpectedly warm, reflecting the colours of the sunset. That touch changes the way you look at the lake from then on. NDES seem to have that quality. A brief immersion in something unexpected, which forever alters the way the person sees the landscape of existence. Skeptics point out that the brain is capable of astonishing illusions, and that extraordinary experiences do not prove survival after death. That is true, and science must remain careful. Yet the fact that so many people across cultures describe such similar landscapes is itself intriguing. The tunnel, the light, the panoramic life review, the presence is waiting. These motifs echo again and again. Even if they were only the mind's final work, they would still tell us something profound about the way consciousness prepares itself for transition. And perhaps that is the key. The afterlife, if it exists, may not be a distant country we only reach once. It may be a landscape already woven into us, glimpsed when the ordinary filters fall away. In the hospital room, amid machines and monitors, a patient may suddenly find themselves in a world of light more convincing than the machines themselves. The border between here and there is not a sharp line but a thinning veil. For our theme tonight, these accounts carry a quiet message. You may already be inhabiting an afterlife-like state, one whose full depth is normally hidden by the interface of daily perception. In rare moments, whether in dreams, meditations, or near death, those depths open, reminding us that what we call life is perhaps a chapter within a larger book. The after effects of NDE suggest that the purpose of this chapter is not simply survival, but transformation, to learn, to love, to awaken. So as you listen, perhaps let the idea settle softly. At the edge of death, many people report finding not chaos but clarity, not darkness but light, not an ending but a beginning. Their stories do not demand belief, but they invite reflection. If life is already a kind of afterlife, then every moment of awareness, every act of kindness, every breath is part of the same luminous continuum. When doctors measure the final moments of the brain, they sometimes find a surprising pattern. Instead of silence, there can be a sudden surge, a burst of activity that looks more like intense wakefulness than fading. Electrodes record gamma waves, fast, synchronized rhythms associated with memory, perception, and sometimes even heightened states of awareness. It is as though, just before the curtain falls, the orchestra swells into a last crescendo. For years, researchers assumed that the dying brain simply shut down, neurons firing irregularly until they stopped. But recent studies in both humans and animals suggest otherwise. In 2013, scientists observed rats at the moment of cardiac arrest. Instead of fading quietly, the rats' brains produced a surge of gamma oscillations stronger than during waking life. Later, similar findings appeared in human patients. Electroencephalograms showed bursts of organised activity seconds after the heart had stopped. Far from drifting into nothingness, the brain seemed to ignite one last flare. What might this mean for the mind? Gamma rhythms are often linked with binding together different parts of perception, creating the sense of a unified moment. They're also associated with vivid memory recall, as if the brain is pulling fragments into a panoramic view. Some researchers wonder if this surge could explain reports of life reviews during near-death experiences, the sudden reliving of entire lifetimes in a flash of clarity. Neuroscientist David Eagleman has offered another layer to this story. He notes that what we call the present is always slightly delayed. Sensory signals take time to travel, and the brain takes time to assemble them into a coherent scene. By the time you become aware of now, it is already a fraction of a second old. Your present is a reconstruction of the past. In other words, consciousness is always playing catch-up, always buffering reality the way a video stream buffers on a slow connection. If this is true, then our experience of life is already a kind of memory, a replay of events that have just happened. And at death, when the brain releases its final surge, it may not simply be generating hallucinations. It may be weaving together the most powerful and complete replay of all, the story of a lifetime gathered in one last moment of buffering. To bring this into an everyday image, think of an old film projector. The reel does not show one continuous motion. It shows frame after frame, each a frozen picture. The light and mechanism blend them into movement. Yet what you see on the screen is always a fraction of a second behind the flicker of the bulb. Life is like that. We believe we live in the present, but we are watching the film a heartbeat behind its making. This perspective adds a curious twist to the idea of the afterlife. If life is already a replay, if the now we live in is already the past, then perhaps death is not a sudden leap into the unknown, but the continuation of the replay at a higher resolution. The gamma surge could be the brain's last attempt to catch up fully, to create a seamless narrative of everything that has been. For those who experience it, this may feel like stepping into a timeless review, a panoramic vision where every choice, every touch, every glance returns at once. Of course, many scientists caution that these surges may be nothing more than chemistry, neurons firing chaotically as energy fades. Yet the organised patterns suggest otherwise. They are not the scattered sparks of a dying machine. They are coordinated, rhythmic, coherent. It is as if the brain, at its very end, tries to leave a signature, a final chord that resonates beyond the silence. Consider what this means for us in ordinary life. Each moment we live is already a step behind reality. We walk through rooms that the brain has just finished painting. We listen to words that the mind has just finished stitching together. We live in echoes, and yet those echoes are rich enough to feel real. Death, in this sense, may be less an abrupt end, and more the culmination of echoes, an echo so complete it feels like stepping into eternity. Think again of streaming a video online. When the internet is slow, the screen buffers, showing you a few seconds behind the live broadcast. At the end, when the connection drops, the buffered frames may still play for a little while, giving you the illusion of continuity. That last playthrough is not false. It is the real video, just delayed. Perhaps consciousness is like that. When the body stops, the buffered images surge through, giving the mind its final panorama before fading into silence, or into something beyond silence. Some who have stood at the edge describe it not as fading, but as expansion. A man who survived cardiac arrest said he felt as though he had lived his entire life again in a single instant, every memory layered on every other. A woman said she saw moments she'd forgotten entirely. Childhood scenes, stray kindnesses, times she had hurt others, all arriving with clarity, as though the mind had opened a vast archive. Whether this is brain chemistry or something deeper, the effect is the same. The end becomes a review, a final illumination. For our theme tonight, the message is gentle. We may already be living one, step removed from the raw present, experiencing life as a stream that has already flowed. Death may not be a leap into nothing but the natural conclusion of the stream, a final surge, a last wave, carrying us into the wider ocean. If so, then every moment is already a kind of afterlife, a remembered present, a buffered echo. So as you rest, imagine the day you just lived as a film still playing in the theatre of the mind. Each thought, each gesture, each kindness is already part of memory, part of the light that flickers across the screen. When the projector finally stops, perhaps the film does not vanish but shines once more, brightly, in a single moment of completion. And in that light, You may realize that you are already living in the afterlife all along, every heartbeat a memory echoing into eternity. Think back to a story you've told many times about your childhood. Perhaps it was the first time you rode a bicycle, or a family holiday, or a funny accident that everyone in your family still laughs about. Each time you tell it, you feel that you are recalling the same event. Yet if you listen closely, the details shift. Sometimes the day was cloudy, sometimes sunny. Sometimes you remember your red jacket, sometimes you're sure it was blue. Over the years, the story becomes polished, smoothed by retelling, until you can no longer distinguish the memory from the story itself. This is not simply nostalgia at work. Neuroscience shows that memory is not a fixed recording, but a living process. Research by Lynn Nadell and others has demonstrated that each time we recall a memory, it reopens like soft clay, vulnerable to reshaping before it is stored again. This process is called reconsolidation. Remembering does not merely retrieve the past, it rewrites it. Our lives are not permanent archives, but shifting diaries, each page revised whenever we read it. The implications are profound. When we look back, we're not travelling to a solid past, but walking into a landscape that changes under our feet. Memory is like sand on a beach. Each wave of recollection reshapes it, smoothing some parts, carving others, leaving new patterns. What we carry with us then is not the original moment but the latest version, adapted to the present. To make this gentle, imagine an old photo album. Over time the photos fade, edges curl, colours shift. Sometimes you add notes in the margins, sometimes you glue new pictures next to old ones. The album is not the event itself, but a living artifact changed by your hands. Memory works like that, only invisibly. Each recall is a kind of editing session, where present emotions and context seep into the past. This may sound unsettling, as though we cannot trust our own recollections. Yet it also reveals something beautiful. If memory is alive, then the past is not a prison. It is more like a manuscript still open to revision. Painful events can be reinterpreted, reshaped by new insights, softened by compassion. Joyful events can be polished, made brighter in memory than they were in the moment. Life in this way becomes less a rigid history and more a work of art, constantly repainted by the artist of awareness. Everyday experience shows this clearly. Two siblings may recall the same childhood moment in very different ways. One remembers the laughter, the warmth, the safety. The other recalls the tension, the arguments, the uncertainty. Both memories feel true, and in a sense, both are. The memory is not a photograph but a reflection, bent by the angle of perspective, coloured by the emotions of the rememberer. This plasticity of memory connects deeply with our theme of life as an afterlife-like state. If our experience of the past is always reconstructed, then our very sense of self is woven from echoes that are never fixed. Who we believe we are is based on a story rewritten again and again. We are already living in a realm of shifting visions, where the truth of the past is not solid but fluid. This is not unlike the descriptions of the Bardo or the near-death life review, where one relives moments not as static films but as living experiences, coloured by feeling and consequence. David Eagleman once said that memory is less like a filing cabinet and more like a Wikipedia page. You can revisit it, edit it, and every time you do, the memory changes. In the same way, consciousness itself may be a continual act of editing, where identity is built not on fixed facts but on living reconstructions. If life is a rehearsal for the afterlife, then perhaps this is part of the lesson, to realise that even the past is not final, that meaning is made anew each time we remember. Think of how this shapes relationships. An argument from years ago may linger in memory like a shadow. Each time you recall it, you may feel the sting again. But suppose one day you remember it with new compassion. You imagine how the other person felt. You see the fear or hurt beneath their words. Suddenly the same event takes on a different hue. The memory itself is changed, the past softens, and the present becomes freer. That is reconsolidation at work, not as a trick, but as a gentle rewriting that heals. There is even research suggesting that therapy can deliberately use reconsolidation to treat trauma. By recalling painful events in safe contexts, then introducing new perspectives, people can overwrite the sting of old memories. What once triggered fear can become less threatening. In this way, memory itself becomes a tool of transformation. The past does not need to trap us. It can be reauthored. And so, we return to the image of the afterlife. Traditions often describe a life review, where every deed is revisited, every emotion relived. Perhaps what they are pointing to is a process already occurring within us, a continual reconsolidation of who we are, shaped not by fixed events, but by the meaning we draw from them. Life itself may be the rehearsal, the long practice of learning how to rewrite our stories with greater clarity, kindness, and wisdom. Tonight, as you drift, you might think of your own memories as pages in that shifting diary. Some are heavy, some light, some faded, some bright. Each time you turn to them, you add a stroke of colour, a line of annotation, a change of tone. The past is not behind you, but alive within you, reshaped by each glance. And if the past is so fluid, then perhaps life itself is already a kind of afterlife, where the script is always being revised until the final review. Picture yourself watching a short video of people passing a basketball back and forth. You're asked to count how many times the players in white shirts pass the ball. You focus carefully, eyes tracking the ball, counting each pass. At the end, the experimenter asks if you noticed anything unusual. Most people say no. Then the video is played again, and to your astonishment, you see a person in a gorilla suit walk calmly through the players, pause, beat their chest, and then walk off screen. The first time you did not notice at all. Your eyes saw, but your mind did not register. This famous experiment, led by psychologist Daniel Simons, is one of the clearest demonstrations of inattentional blindness. We miss what is in plain sight if our attention is fixed elsewhere. It is not a flaw of the eyes, but a limit of the mind. We see only what we are prepared to see. In everyday life, the gorilla appears in many forms. You search for your keys, certain they are not on the table, only to find later that they were sitting right there. You skim a page of text, eyes gliding over a crucial sentence without taking it in. You drive a familiar route and suddenly realize you have no memory of the last 5 minutes. The information was there, but attention was elsewhere. Our perception is selective, and what we call reality is stitched together from fragments chosen by the mind. Another phenomenon, called change blindness, shows a similar effect. In experiments, researchers have switched one object for another in a photograph while people looked away briefly. Often, observers fail to notice even large changes, a door disappearing, a person replaced by someone else. It is not that the eyes fail, but that the brain edits reality on the assumption that continuity is more likely than sudden change. We live in a world of approximations, filling in gaps without realizing. If this is true in experiments, it is also true in the theatre of our lives. How many subtle acts of kindness go unseen because we are counting the passes of daily obligations? How many moments of beauty pass by unnoticed because we are distracted by lists and screens? Perhaps the afterlife is not hidden in another realm at all, but woven into this one, missed because our attention is elsewhere. Think of walking home at dusk, eyes on your phone, messages scrolling. Around you, the sky's painted with shifting colours, orange, fading to pink, the first stars peeking through. You may not see them at all until someone points up and you suddenly realise what you missed. The stars were there all along. The blindness was not of the eyes, but of attention. Ancient traditions often describe spiritual awakening as seeing what has always been present. The Buddha spoke of enlightenment as waking up to a truth already here. Christian mystics described scales falling from the eyes. Gnostic teachers spoke of filters lifted. In modern science we call it attentional limits, but the echo's the same. What we see is only a portion, and much is missed. From this perspective, life may already be filled with afterlife clues, moments that whisper of something larger, more luminous. But we're too busy counting the passes of survival to notice. Perhaps the sudden sense of déjà vu, the uncanny timing of a coincidence, the unexpected warmth of a stranger's smile are all gorillas walking through the game, visible only when we pause and look. This blindness can also shape how we view ourselves. We may focus so intently on our mistakes that we miss our quiet strengths. We may replay moments of failure, blind to the many times we offered kindness. Just as the basketball counters miss the gorilla, we miss the presence of grace in our own story. The comforting thought is that attention can be trained. Just as meditation strengthens awareness of breath and thought, so can we train ourselves to notice the unnoticed. A simple walk, taken slowly, eyes open to sound, colour and texture, becomes a rehearsal in seeing beyond the automatic. Each time we shift attention, we widen the window of perception, and in doing so we may glimpse more of the luminous hidden within the ordinary. Imagine again the gorilla experiment. The second time you watch, you cannot miss the figure. Once you know to look, it is obvious. Awakening may be like that. The world has always contained more than we saw, but once attention expands, it cannot be unseen. Life becomes richer, fuller, more transparent. In connection with our theme, inattentional blindness suggests that the afterlife may not be a distant place we travel to, but a layer already here, one we overlook because our focus is narrow. Just as participants in the experiment swear there was no gorilla, we swear that only the material world exists. Yet perhaps all along something larger was walking through, chest beating, waiting for us to notice. So tonight as you rest, you might imagine your day replayed with a wider lens. What kindnesses did you overlook? What moments of beauty slipped by unnoticed? What subtle signs brushed against you, waiting for recognition? The gorilla in your day may have been a word of encouragement, a shaft of light through a window, a memory surfacing at just the right time. They were there. Whether you noticed or not depended only on attention. And if this is true, then perhaps life itself is already the afterlife, layered with presences and meanings we usually fail to see. The veil is not only after death, it is here, woven by our own inattentiveness. To lift it is less about travelling far and more about widening the circle of what we notice. Inside your mind, there is a storyteller who never seems to rest. When something happens, large or small, this voice begins weaving an explanation. You miss a bus, and the voice says, "It's because you were careless." You ace an exam, and the voice insists, "Of course, you studied harder than anyone." You feel a sudden chill, and the voice tells you a draft came through the window. The explanations may be right or they may not, but the voice rarely admits uncertainty. It fills the silence with stories so convincing that you believe them without question. Neuroscientist Michael Gazzaniga, in his studies of split-brain patients, identified this voice as the interpreter. When the two hemispheres of the brain were disconnected, patients sometimes acted in ways one side of their brain did not understand. Yet when asked why they acted, the interpreter instantly supplied a reason, even if it was invented. If the left hand picked up an object without conscious command, the interpreter would calmly explain that the person wanted it. The voice was not lying out of malice. It was doing what it always does, weaving fragments into a coherent story. This interpreter is one of the mind's most subtle illusions. It convinces us that we live in a continuous logical world where everything has explanation and purpose. But in truth, the world is filled with gaps, coincidences and mysteries. The interpreter smooths over the cracks, stitching them into a fabric of apparent order. Everyday life is full of these invisible stitches. Think of déjà vu, that eerie sense that you have lived a moment before. The interpreter quickly assures you it must be coincidence or a trick of memory. Think of a sudden mood that has no clear cause. Instead of sitting with the uncertainty, the interpreter finds a reason. It's the weather, or I didn't sleep well. The reasons may or may not be true, but they satisfy the mind's hunger for narrative. This constant storytelling gives us a sense of self. We believe we are the characters the interpreter describes, consistent beings moving through a world of cause and effect. Yet if we step back, another presence can be felt, the witness. This is the quiet awareness that hears the interpreter's stories without being carried away. When you meditate and notice thoughts drifting past, that noticing is the witness. When you catch yourself thinking, "Why am I angry?" and pause to observe, that pause is the witness. It does not explain, it does not argue, it simply observes. The difference between interpreter and witness is profound. The interpreter weaves the veil, the witness sees through it. The interpreter creates a stream of explanations, often comforting, sometimes misleading. The witness remains silent, aware, untouched. Many spiritual traditions describe awakening as the shift from identifying with the interpreter to resting in the witness. Consider a small example. You're walking in the rain and a car splashes water onto your shoes. Instantly the interpreter rushes in. How rude that driver was. You feel anger rising. Then, for a moment, the witness appears. You notice the thought, the surge of feeling, the narrative forming. You realize it is just a story. The anger softens, the rain is simply falling, the car simply passed, your shoes are wet. The event is no longer a drama, only a moment. In daily life, the interpreter is useful. Without it, we might feel lost, unable to connect events into meaning. But when we mistake the interpreter's stories for ultimate truth, we live inside a shadow play, never touching the light behind it. The witness, quiet and spacious, is the glimpse of that light. This distinction connects gently to the theme of the afterlife. If life is already a Bardo, an intermediate space of illusions, then the interpreter is the voice that keeps us wandering there. It tells us that shadows are real, that our fears and desires are the whole of existence. The witness, by contrast, is the awareness that recognizes the shadows as shadows. In near-death experiences, people often describe a shift. The narrative voice fades, and a clear, wordless knowing remains. They speak of communicating without speech, understanding without explanation. Perhaps that is the witness revealed when the interpreter falls silent. Science, too, hints at this difference. Studies of meditation show reduced activity in regions associated with self-narrative, while awareness remains bright. Psychedelic research reports similar patterns. The sense of ego story dissolves, yet a deeper awareness persists. These may be glimpses of what happens when the interpreter loosens its grip and the witness steps forward. To make this more approachable, think of listening to music. The interpreter explains, "This is a sad song. This is in minor key. This reminds me of last year." But if you let go of the explanations, you can simply hear the music, pure sound rising and falling. That pure listening is the witness. The explanations may return, but now you know they're only one layer. In this way, life can be seen as practice for the afterlife. Each time we catch the interpreter spinning its stories and step back into the witness, we are rehearsing for the moment when stories fall away completely. Each pause of awareness is a small resurrection while alive, a thinning of the veil. So tonight, as you drift, notice the interpreter's voice. It may be commenting on these words, judging, agreeing, or doubting. And then notice the space that hears the voice. That space is the witness, silent, steady, untroubled. In that space, the afterlife is already present. You are not waiting for it to come. You are living in it now, hidden behind the stories but available in every breath. Each night, as you close your eyes, You surrender the world of waking for the landscapes of dream. Streets curve into impossible angles, people speak in riddles, the ordinary bends into the strange. Yet within these shifting worlds there are moments when a flicker of awareness dawns. You realise you are dreaming. In that instant the dream becomes lucid. The environment responds to your intention. The sky brightens when you wish for light. A locked door opens when you decide to step through. Fearful figures dissolve when you face them calmly. This phenomenon of lucid dreaming has been studied carefully by researchers such as Stephen LeBurge. He showed that lucid dreamers could communicate from within dreams by making agreed-upon eye movements that were recorded in the lab. The dream, far from being a vague blur, can be a coherent space where the dreamer retains choice and awareness. What fascinates scientists and spiritual teachers alike is how similar this state seems to descriptions of the afterlife or the Bardo. In each case, the environment appears to be responsive, shaped not by physical law but by the qualities of consciousness itself. Think of the last time you had a nightmare. Perhaps you were being chased. The fear felt real, your breath fast, your heart pounding. Yet when you woke, the room was quiet, your body safe. In a lucid dream, instead of waking to escape, you might turn and face the pursuer. Sometimes the figure changes, softens, even transforms into something helpful. The nightmare was not a fixed world, but a projection, altered by awareness. The Tibetan practice of dream yoga takes this further. Practitioners train to become aware within dreams, using them as laboratories for awakening. If you can recognize the dreamer's dream, they say, you can also recognize waking life as a kind of dream, filled with projections mistaken for solid truth. Daily experience offers echoes of this. Have you noticed how the mood you carry shapes the world you see? On days of joy, strangers seem friendlier, colours brighter, challenges lighter. On days of sorrow, the same street feels heavy, faces appear closed, sounds harsh. The world itself has not changed. Your awareness has shifted, and reality seems to bend with it. Dreams, lucid or not, dramatize this effect, showing how powerfully consciousness colours its environment. Near-death experiences often describe realms where intention shapes reality instantly. A thought of movement becomes flight. A wish to understand brings knowledge. A desire to see loved ones calls them forth. These reports sound uncanny until you remember your own dreams, where the shift of attention changes the scene. In this sense, we practice every night for the afterlife, rehearsing in miniature what it might be like to dwell in a world woven from mind. Lucid dreaming also teaches us something about fear. In waking life, we often run from what frightens us. Difficult conversations, uncertain choices, painful memories. In dreams, fear appears as monsters, storms, collapsing buildings. When lucidity arises, the dreamer can face them, sometimes discovering that they dissolve into light or reveal themselves as teachers. Perhaps this is why Tibetan teachers train so diligently in dream awareness, to prepare the mind to meet the visions of the Bardo not with panic but with recognition. If life is already a rehearsal for death, then dreams are the nightly practice sessions. The border between waking and dreaming is more porous than we think. Scientists have shown that external sounds, touches, even lights can weave themselves into dreams. A gentle alarm becomes a ringing bell in a dream cathedral. A touch on the hand becomes a bird landing on your skin. This permeability reminds us that what we call solid reality may also be influenced in ways we do not notice. The dream is not sealed off. It is interactive. Perhaps waking life is too. To make this more approachable, imagine painting with watercolours. A brushstroke spreads, colours blending, shapes forming where pigment meets water. In dreams, intention is the brush, awareness the water, and reality the paper. What appears depends on how gently or firmly you guide the stroke. The image is not fixed until attention settles. Waking life may be similar. The colours of our perceptions spread into the world, blending with what is already there, shaping the picture we experience. If this is true, then we're already living in a dreamlike afterlife. The houses, the streets, the conversations are icons in an interface, responsive to the tone of our awareness. Each night we wander through dreams within dreams, practicing how to recognize the mind's creations. Each day we return to what feels solid, forgetting again that solidity itself may be only another dream. Perhaps the most important lesson of lucid dreaming is not control but recognition. To fly, to change scenery, to summon delights. These are entertaining. But the deeper practice is to realize that the dream is dream. When this realization is carried into waking life, it becomes the seed of awakening. Fear softens, desire loosens, compassion grows, because you know the shadows are not ultimate. So tonight, as you close your eyes, notice the way the mind begins to drift. The images may come softly, random at first, then more coherent. If you remember in that moment that you were dreaming, you may walk through the dream as though through a corridor of the afterlife, where each vision is both real and not real, meaningful and fleeting. And even if you do not become lucid, the practice itself, the intention to notice, plants a seed. That seed may sprout in waking life, reminding you in moments of confusion that you're not bound by shadows. You are the dreamer, already dwelling in the afterlife of awareness. There are children who speak of places they have never been, of families they have never met, of lives they could not have lived in the short span since their birth. A boy in India remembers a village miles away, describing the house where he once lived and the scar that ended his life. A girl in the American South insists she once had another mother, recalling her name, her house, even the colour of her curtains. Researchers like Ian Stevenson and Jim Tucker have collected thousands of such cases. Some can be explained as coincidence, suggestion, or imagination, yet others contain details verified later. Names, locations, marks on the body that correspond to remembered injuries. Whether or not one believes in reincarnation, these stories whisper of something larger than the simple narrative of birth to death. They suggest that memory, identity, and consciousness may not begin neatly at the first cry of a newborn. They may stretch backward, carried across thresholds we do not remember. Life may not start as a blank slate, but as a page already written on, faintly visible beneath new ink. If memory can stretch backward, perhaps it can also stretch outward, into patterns we only notice when we pause. Carl Jung spoke of synchronicity, those moments when coincidences carry meaning too sharp to ignore. You think of a friend you've not spoken to in years and suddenly they call. You dream of a symbol, and the next day it appears on a sign in the street. These are not coincidences in the statistical sense, for coincidence is common. They are coincidences that strike us as personal, charged, meaningful. They feel like threads being tugged from beyond the visible loom. Bernard Beitman, a modern psychiatrist who has studied coincidence extensively, suggests that these moments often cluster during transitions in life, periods of birth, loss, illness, or change. When life is shifting, meaning seems to break through more often, as though the boundaries between worlds are thinner at the seams. Meeting an old friend on the very day you're deciding whether to change jobs feels less like chance and more like a sign, a reminder that your story is interwoven with others in ways you cannot see. Everyday life gives countless examples. You misplace a book and, while searching for it, stumble on an old letter that answers a question you'd been asking silently. You happen to overhear a stranger on a bus speak the very phrase that resolves your doubt. You open a radio station and the song lyrics echo your hidden feeling. Each moment could be dismissed as random, yet they carry a taste of orchestration, as if life itself is whispering. Children's pre-birth memories and synchronicity both point to the same possibility. Consciousness may not be confined to a single line between birth and death. It may weave through time like a thread that surfaces in many places, sometimes earlier than we expect, sometimes in patterns that seem designed. The afterlife, from this view, is not a separate country we only visit once. It is a dimension that touches us constantly, before birth, during life, after death, shaping meaning all along. To make this gentle, think of a piece of music. A symphony begins before you arrive at the concert hall. When you enter, the melody is already playing. You join in midway, listen, experience, perhaps even hum along. When you leave at intermission, the music continues. Your part in the listening is only one passage in a larger composition. The children who recall earlier lives may be remembering earlier movements of the music. The synchronicities we notice may be echoes of the same melody, weaving in from beyond our hearing. Some traditions preserve similar ideas. In Tibetan Buddhism, stories are told of children who recognize the possessions of lamas who died before they were born. In Hindu thought, the soul carries impressions, called samskaras, across lifetimes, like seeds planted in the soil of the new life. In the West, stories of before-birth memories sometimes come from children who describe choosing their parents, watching from above, waiting for the right moment. These accounts are poetic, perhaps symbolic, but they all suggest that the threshold of birth may not be an absolute beginning. Jung himself described synchronicity as a causal connecting principle, meaning that events may be linked not by cause and effect, but by meaning. In our theme, this resonates deeply. If life is already an afterlife classroom, then synchronicities like hints from the curriculum, nudges from beyond the visible, reminders that we are connected to something larger. Imagine walking along a forest path. Suddenly a shaft of light falls exactly where you had paused, illuminating a flower you would have otherwise missed. It feels as though the world itself has conspired to show you this moment. Perhaps it has. Not in the sense of a hidden hand arranging every leaf, but in the sense that your life and the larger pattern are entwined, resonating like notes in harmony. Skeptics may point out that coincidences are inevitable in a world of billions of people and countless events. They are right statistically. Yet what matters is not the number of coincidences, but the way they feel. A coincidence that passes unnoticed is just a number. A coincidence that pierces the heart, that arrives at the right moment with the right message, becomes something else. It becomes a signpost in the fog, pointing to meaning beyond measure. For our journey tonight, both children's memories and synchronicities remind us that the veil between worlds is not reserved for the moment of death. It flickers at the edges of life too, before birth, during transitions, in moments of profound meaning. These glimpses suggest that we are not isolated dots on a line but travellers on a circle, entering and exiting through many doors, connected by patterns we cannot fully see. So as you rest, consider your own life. Have there been coincidences that felt more like whispers? Have you met someone at just the right time, heard words that answered your hidden question, stumbled on a memory that did not seem entirely yours? Perhaps these are reminders that you are already in the afterlife's embrace, not waiting to enter it, but living within its pattern, woven into a tapestry whose threads stretch beyond your birth and beyond your death. Toward the end of life, many people describe a curious shift. Instead of confusion, there can be a sudden clarity. Instead of fear, a strange peace. Doctors, nurses, and families have recorded countless accounts of patients who, in their final days or even final hours, speak with unexpected lucidity, sometimes after long periods of silence or decline. They describe visions of departed loved ones waiting for them. They speak of journeys, of light, of home. The British researcher Peter Fenwick has studied these end-of-life experiences in detail, and he notes how strikingly similar they are across cultures and continents. It is not only the religious or the hopeful who report them. A woman who had been unresponsive for days suddenly opens her eyes and whispers, "He's here." smiling as though greeting someone invisible to the rest of the room. A man nearing death insists he must get ready to travel, asking for his shoes, though he has not walked in months. A child in hospice speaks of a grandmother waiting at the foot of the bed, though the grandmother passed away before the child was born. These stories repeat again and again, like gentle refrains in the music of dying. What is most moving is the feeling that accompanies them, the sense of going home. People describe not a departure into the unknown, but a return to somewhere deeply familiar. They may use different words, the garden, the light, the other side, but the mood is the same. It is not an alien country they are approaching, but a place they somehow already know, a place they have missed. The homesickness is not painful, but tender, like a traveller who sees the skyline of their city after a long journey and feels tears rise unbidden. This sense of familiarity is hard to explain. How can a place never seen feel like home? Yet it mirrors something we feel even in life. Think of travelling to a new town and being struck by déjà vu, as though the streets were waiting for you, or standing at the shore of the sea and feeling a longing that is not entirely your own. There are moments when the heart recognises something before the mind does. End-of-life visions seem to carry that same recognition, but magnified, as though the veil has thinned enough for the soul to glimpse its origin. These experiences often bring comfort not only to the dying, but to their families. A daughter holding her mother's hand may hear her whisper, "Don't be afraid, they're waiting for me." The daughter may not see anyone, but she feels the peace in her mother's voice, and the fear of loss softens. Nurses who work in palliative care sometimes say that the dying teach the living how to die. By watching the calm, by hearing the words of welcome, families are reminded that death is not only rupture but passage. Skeptics, of course, offer explanations. They suggest that hallucinations may arise from medications, fevers, or lack of oxygen. They note that brains under stress can generate vivid imagery. Yet Fenwick and others point out that the consistency of these reports, the recurrence of familiar motifs, the sense of peace, the recognition of loved ones, goes beyond random hallucination. Hallucinations are usually frightening, disordered, chaotic. End-of-life visions, by contrast, are structured, calming, filled with coherence. To make this gentler, imagine being on a long journey by train. For hours you pass fields and towns, the scenery repetitive, the body weary. Then, as dusk falls, you notice the faint glow on the horizon, the lights of your own city. Even before you arrive, you know you're near. The body relaxes, the mind clears, and anticipation replaces fatigue. End-of-life clarity has this quality, the sense of arrival before arrival, the recognition of home before stepping through the door. This motif of going home echoes through spiritual traditions. In Christianity, the soul is often described as returning to the Father's house. In Hindu thought, the Atman returns to Brahman, like a river flowing back into the sea. In Buddhism, the mind returns to its true nature, like clouds dissolving to reveal the sky. Different languages, different metaphors, yet the same direction. Not away from life, but back to the source. For those who remain, these stories can be bittersweet. We do not see the loved ones waiting. We do not feel the homecoming in the same way. We feel only the empty chair, the silence after. Yet even here, there can be comfort in knowing that the journey was not faced alone. The clarity of the dying becomes a gift to the living, a glimpse of continuity in the face of loss. It may be that these visions are the mind's way of softening the transition, preparing the person with images of love and familiarity. Or it may be that they are genuine glimpses beyond the veil, doors opening to a place that has always been there. Either way, the effect is the same. Fear lessens, peace grows, and the passage feels like a return rather than an exile. For our theme tonight, the message is gentle and profound. If people at the threshold of death feel they are going home, then perhaps life itself is a journey away from home, a wandering in the Bardo, a shadow play. The afterlife is not an unknown to be feared, but a place already known, remembered in the heart. And if that is true, then we're already living in the afterlife, homesick at times without knowing why, sensing the distant lights of a city we have left but will see again. So as you listen now, think of the moments when you too have felt that longing, without name, that sudden ache of homesickness that was not for any house you knew. Perhaps those were echoes of the same recognition. Perhaps the afterlife is not waiting in the future but surrounding us all along, glimpsed in memory, in longing, in the soft clarity of those about to cross. Most of the time, we imagine the afterlife as something distant, reached only at the end of a long journey. Yet many traditions suggest that glimpses of it are available now, not by travelling far, but by loosening the grip of the self. The veil is not made of distance, but of attention. Crossing does not require leaving, it requires seeing. Meditation is one of the oldest doors. When you sit quietly and watch the breath, thoughts continue to arrive, lists, worries, memories, but slowly they lose their weight. Judson Brewer and other researchers studying meditation show that as the practice deepens, activity in the brain's default mode network quiets. This network is responsible for self-referential chatter, the endless narration of me and my story. When it calms, the sense of self begins to soften. What remains is not nothing but a spacious awareness, clear and open. Practitioners describe this as resting in presence, or in the Tibetan tradition, recognizing Rigpa, the pure awareness that has always been there. This experience is not foreign. You may have felt it during ordinary moments, gazing at the sea until thoughts dissolved, listening to music so deeply that the sense of me disappeared, or walking in a forest and forgetting time. These are small crossings without leaving, moments when the veil thins and awareness tastes its own vastness. Other approaches use more forceful methods. Stanislav Grof developed holotropic breathwork, a practice of deep, rapid breathing accompanied by evocative music. Participants often report visions, encounters, and dissolutions of self, experiences resembling those described in near-death states. In modern neuroscience, Robin Carhart Harris has studied how psychedelics induce ego dissolution. Under their influence, the boundaries of self can melt, giving way to feelings of unity, timelessness, and connection. Brain scans show decreased activity in the default mode network, mirroring meditation's effects by a different route. These practices can be powerful, but they also carry cautions. Without preparation and guidance, they can overwhelm, leaving confusion instead of clarity. Traditions that use them often emphasize intention, respect, and integration. The goal is not escape, but recognition. That the sense of a separate self is a useful interface, not ultimate truth. Dissolving it even briefly can reveal the continuity of awareness beneath. Everyday life, though, is full of gentler versions. Think of how you feel when you lose yourself in music. For a while there is no you listening, only the sound filling space. Or when you serve someone selflessly, helping a child, comforting a friend, caring for a stranger, the boundaries blur. You no longer ask, what do I get in return? In those moments, the line between self and other fades, and what remains is connection. Alan Lux, who studied the psychology of helping, called this the helper's high, a sense of warmth and meaning that comes from dissolving self-other division. Crossing without leaving, then, is not about abandoning life, but seeing it with different eyes. Meditation, breathwork, ego dissolution, or acts of selfless service all show the same principle. When the self loosens, the afterlife is not far away. It is revealed in the very fabric of the present. To make this gentler, imagine looking at a painting up close. All you see are brushstrokes, thick and messy, each one separate. Then you step back and suddenly the strokes merge into a scene, sky, mountain, river. Nothing changed in the paint, only in your perspective. Life may be like that. When we cling tightly to self, we see only strokes. My fear, my desire, my story. When self softens, we see the whole picture, and it feels like stepping into a different world without moving at all. This shift may explain why many who practice these methods report less fear of death. If you have already tasted awareness without boundaries, then the final letting go feels less like loss and more like continuation. The afterlife is not elsewhere. It is the same field of awareness you touched when you sat in silence, when you breathed deeply, when you lost yourself in love. From the outside, such moments may look ordinary. A person sitting still, breathing. A volunteer handing food to someone in need. A musician absorbed in a melody. Yet inside, the veil may have parted. The mind may have glimpsed its own boundless nature. The afterlife may have brushed the edge of daily life, reminding us that we are already in its current, carried without knowing. So as you listen tonight, you might recall a time when you crossed without leaving, a time when self dissolved, however briefly, and you felt part of something larger. It may have been in a sacred space or in a kitchen, in a concert hall or in a quiet walk. The place does not matter. What matters is the recognition that you do not have to wait. The doorway is always here, in the breath, in presence, in service, in love. The afterlife is not only a destination, it is a dimension of now, waiting for the self to loosen its grip. When children play a game, they rarely choose the easiest level. A puzzle that solves itself is boring. A challenge that demands attention, skill and patience is the one that keeps them engaged. The falls and failures are not flaws in the game, but the very features that make it meaningful. Some researchers and spiritual teachers suggest that life may follow a similar design. Before birth, souls may choose their constraints, their difficulties, even their weaknesses, not as punishments, but as lessons. Michael Newton, through his work in hypnotherapy, recorded hundreds of accounts where people under deep regression described planning their lives before entering them. Brian Weiss, another psychiatrist, found similar themes. The idea is simple and radical. We come here not by accident, but by intention. Life is a curriculum. The notion that souls select their challenges might sound fanciful, yet it carries a quiet logic. If consciousness continues beyond one life, then each incarnation is a classroom, each experience an opportunity for growth. A soul that wishes to cultivate patience may choose a life of waiting and frustration. A soul that seeks compassion may choose circumstances where it must feel both sides of suffering. The events may seem harsh when viewed from within, but from the broader perspective, they are chosen exercises in a larger education. Think of a child learning to walk. The falls are inevitable. No parent scolds the child for stumbling. The falls are part of the process. In the same way, the difficulties of life may be less like punishments and more like practice steps. From the inside, pain feels absolute. From the outside, it may be part of a larger arc. Newton's accounts are filled with descriptions of souls gathering before guides or councils, reviewing options, choosing families, even selecting certain obstacles. Whether or not these reports are literal, their symbolism is powerful. They suggest that what we experience as random hardship may have meaning. It may be part of a curriculum designed not to break us but to shape us. Everyday life provides gentler illustrations. A person who once saw their difficult childhood as a curse may later realize it taught resilience and empathy. Someone who endured illness may later find themselves guiding others through the same trial. What felt unbearable at the time becomes in retrospect a lesson that changed the heart. In this way, life resembles a book that only reveals its purpose at the end of the chapter. The curriculum metaphor also explains why forgetting is part of the process. If we remembered the plan too clearly, the challenge would vanish. Playing chess is only meaningful if you do not know the opponent's moves in advance. The uncertainty, the risk, the real possibility of loss are what make courage and love authentic. A life without obstacles would be like a puzzle, with all the pieces already in place. Tidy, but empty. Spiritual traditions echo this idea. Hinduism speaks of karma as not merely punishment, but as opportunities for balance. Buddhism teaches that difficulties can become the path itself. Christianity often frames suffering as a refining fire shaping the soul. Different words, different cultures, yet the same suggestion. Life is not random cruelty, but a workshop of the spirit. Science, while more cautious, offers metaphors that resonate. Psychologists describe post-traumatic growth, where adversity leads to greater resilience, meaning, and compassion. Studies show that people who endure hardship sometimes emerge with a deeper sense of purpose. The wounds, while painful, can become openings. This is not to glorify suffering, but to acknowledge that challenge can transform. If life is a curriculum, then the measure of success is not how easy the path was, but what was learned along the way. A child who struggles with arithmetic may not find numbers pleasant, but the persistence they develop may serve them in every area of life. In the same way, a soul may choose lessons that are difficult precisely because the growth is deep. To bring this closer, imagine a classroom filled with instruments. Each student selects one to practice. Some choose violins, some drums, some flutes. The music is not always harmonious, mistakes abound. Yet the purpose is not perfection on the first try, but learning through practice. Life, seen from the outside, may be that kind of orchestra, with each person rehearsing their part, stumbling, repeating, improving. From within the noise, it may feel chaotic. From beyond, it may be the sound of a curriculum unfolding. This way of seeing does not erase pain, but it offers a softer frame. If hardships are not punishments but chosen lessons, then life is less a hostile landscape and more a school. The very struggles that feel meaningless may hold the seeds of growth. The veil hides the lesson while we are inside it, but in time, the purpose may become clear. So as you listen tonight, think of your own challenges. Perhaps they have felt random, unfair, unbearable at times. Yet imagine, just for a moment, that they were not accidents. Imagine they were puzzles you chose, classrooms you entered, lessons you designed for your own growth. You do not need to believe it absolutely. Simply notice how the thought changes the feeling. Hardship becomes less like exile and more like a curriculum. Life itself becomes less like waiting for the afterlife and more like living in it already, guided by lessons chosen before the first breath. Among the most consistent features of near-death experiences is the life review. People describe it not as watching a movie of their past, but as being immersed in it, reliving each scene with extraordinary clarity. What makes it transformative is not only the accuracy of memory, but the perspective. They report feeling the emotions of others, especially the effects of their own actions. If they spoke harshly, they feel the sting of the words as the other felt them. If they offered kindness, they feel the warmth they gave. The review is not judgment from outside, but empathy experienced from within. Kenneth Ring and Raymond Moody, who studied hundreds of such cases, found the descriptions remarkably consistent. The review is panoramic, spanning entire lives, sometimes in a flash, sometimes in a flowing sequence. It is not selective. The small moments appear alongside the great. A hurried word to a stranger, a gesture of generosity, an act of neglect, all are shown. Survivors often say it was not frightening but profoundly instructive. They come back not terrified of punishment, but inspired to live differently. Imagine for a moment standing in a hall of mirrors. Each mirror reflects you from a different angle, smiling, frowning, bending, reaching. In the life review, the mirrors are not visual but emotional. You see yourself as others saw you, and you feel yourself as they felt you. The careless joke that hurt a friend echoes back with the pain it caused. The unnoticed kindness you gave returns multiplied in warmth. You discover that your life was woven into others' lives in ways you never realized. This direct empathy transforms ethics from abstraction into lived experience. Philosophers write about moral duty. Religions speak of commandments. Parents teach rules. But the life review bypasses rules. It shows you directly, viscerally, what it meant to be you for others. To hurt another is to hurt yourself. To uplift another is to uplift yourself. The lesson is not imposed from outside, but revealed from within. In daily life, we rarely see the ripples of our actions. A word spoken at breakfast may shape someone's mood for hours. A smile given to a stranger may lighten a difficult day. A moment of neglect may wound more deeply than we know. We act, then move on, unaware of the echoes. The life review brings the echoes back, letting us hear the music of our own actions in full. Consider the analogy of throwing pebbles into a pond. Each pebble sends ripples outward, crossing, mingling, touching distant shores. You may forget the pebble, but the ripples continue. In the review, you stand at the shore and watch all the ripples returning. The pond reveals the patterns you created for good or for harm. What is striking is how survivors describe the tone of the review. It is not presented with scolding or condemnation. Many speak of a presence of light, a being of compassion who accompanies them. This presence does not judge in anger, but invites them to see clearly. The review is like a teacher showing a student their work, not to shame them, but to help them understand. This is what your choices created. This is what others felt. Now you know psychologically, this may be the most powerful form of learning. To know that kindness matters is one thing. To feel the joy it creates is another. To know that cruelty wounds is one thing. To feel the wound you inflicted is another. After returning, many people report living with greater kindness, patience, and empathy. They no longer fear death as punishment, but see life as opportunity. This connects deeply with our theme of already living in the afterlife. If the review awaits us after death, it may also be rehearsed in life. Each night before sleep, you might replay the day. Did you leave someone smiling or frowning? Did you ease a burden or add to it? This gentle practice mirrors the review, allowing ethics to become lived awareness. The afterlife is not only beyond, it is already here in the way our choices echo. Spiritual traditions often speak of judgment after death. The Egyptians weighed the heart against the feather of truth. Christianity speaks of standing before God. Buddhism speaks of karma ripening. Perhaps all of these point to the same reality. Not a tribunal handing out sentences, but a confrontation with truth itself, experienced directly. The scales are balanced not by decree, but by empathy. To bring this closer, imagine you are telling a story at dinner, and suddenly you see the expression on a friend's face. You realise your words, though amusing to you, were cutting to them. In that moment, you feel both your intent and their pain. You adjust, you soften, you apologise. That small moment is a miniature life review. You see yourself from the other side and grow through it. The lesson is clear. What matters is not how much we accumulate, how much we achieve, or how loudly we are praised. What matters is how we touch others, how we leave them feeling, how we contribute to the shared web of experience. In the end, the review suggests love is the measure, compassion is the currency, connection is the test. So tonight, as you listen, you might reflect gently on your own ripples. Imagine a review of just this day, the words you spoke, the gestures you made, the presence you offered. How would it feel to experience them from the other side? You do not need to wait for the afterlife to know. The practice can begin now, in each moment of attention, in each act of care. In this way, life itself becomes the afterlife classroom, teaching through empathy, guiding us toward love. Imagine playing a game of chess where every move of your opponent is revealed in advance. You know exactly what will happen, how to counter, and how the game will end. At first, this might feel powerful, even comforting, but soon it would lose its meaning. The excitement of discovery, the tension of uncertainty, the triumph of finding your own move, all of that would vanish. Without mystery there is no challenge. Without challenge there is no growth. Life, some suggest, is much the same. If we arrived here remembering every detail of who we were before, if we could see every outcome, then love, courage, and empathy would lose their authenticity. To love would be easy if we knew that no one could leave. To be brave would be simple if we knew the danger was only apparent. To be compassionate would be trivial if we could already feel everyone's pain as our own. What gives these virtues weight is risk. What makes them real is the possibility of failure. This is why forgetting is not a flaw of life but a feature. The veil of forgetfulness, described in many traditions, allows us to live as though everything is at stake. In Plato's dialogues, souls drink from the river Lethe before birth, forgetting their past so they can enter new lives, unburdened. In Hindu and Buddhist thought, ignorance, avidya, is both the obstacle and the teacher. In modern spiritual accounts, souls describe choosing to forget so that lessons may be learned from within, not imposed from above. Forgetting shapes the story of who we are. Each morning we wake with no memory of the dream we just lived, and yet we continue. Each year we forget details of past days, but the shape of the life remains. Without forgetting, there would be no room for the new. A diary filled on every page leaves no space for fresh writing. Forgetting clears the pages so that new lessons can be inscribed. This value of forgetting can be seen even in everyday life. Think of how quickly a child forgives. The quarrel from yesterday is forgotten, and play resumes. That forgetting allows relationships to heal. Or think of how grief, though never gone, softens over time as memory blurs the sharpest edges. If every loss remained as raw as the first day, life would be unbearable. Forgetting here is mercy. Neuroscience also shows that forgetting is not a defect but a function. The brain prunes memories to prevent overload, keeping what seems useful and releasing the rest. Like a gardener trimming branches so the tree can grow, forgetting allows the mind to focus on what matters now. If we remembered every detail, we would drown in irrelevance. The ability to forget is what allows us to choose. When viewed as part of an afterlife curriculum, forgetting becomes even more profound. If life is a classroom, then remembering the test answers makes the learning hollow. Only by entering with uncertainty, with genuine not knowing, do we discover who we are under pressure. Love becomes meaningful because we could choose selfishness instead. Courage becomes precious because fear feels real. Empathy becomes deep because we cannot automatically feel what others feel. We must choose to imagine, to care, to reach. Think of mountain climbers. They do not choose the easiest slopes but the ones that test them. They climb knowing they may fall, and it is the very risk that makes the summit exhilarating. If the mountain were flat, the journey would not transform them. In the same way, souls may choose the mountains of life, forgetting their ropes and maps, so that the climb becomes real. Of course, forgetting also brings pain. We forget lessons we wish we had remembered. We repeat mistakes. We lose track of our own worth. Yet perhaps this too is part of the design. To stumble, to fall, to learn again. These repetitions deepen the grooves of wisdom. A lesson remembered without struggle is easily dismissed. A lesson earned through forgetting and rediscovering sinks deeper into the soul. And so, in this view, life's veil of forgetfulness is not a punishment but a gift. It allows us to live as though we are mortal, as though everything could be lost. It allows us to love fiercely because time seems short. It allows us to be brave because the outcome is uncertain. It allows us to be compassionate because we cannot automatically feel what another feels. Through forgetting, we make choices that reveal our character. To make this gentler, imagine a play on stage. The actors know outside the play that they are friends. Yet when the curtain rises, they forget for the sake of the story. They play rivals, lovers, heroes, villains. The forgetting is what makes the drama compelling, what makes the emotions real. When the curtain falls, they remember. Life may be like that. We are actors forgetting for a while so that the play can move us, so that the lessons can matter. And perhaps when the curtain falls at the end of life, the memory returns. We see the roles we played, the risks we took, the loves we cherished, the mistakes we made. We recognise the value of the forgetting that allowed it all to feel so real. Then we step off stage, wiser, ready for another act, another script, another forgetting. So as you rest tonight, consider that forgetting is not failure but part of the design. The memories you do not hold are not lost but waiting. The lessons you repeat are not wasted but deepening. Life is not less meaningful because you forget. It is meaningful because you do. Each morning, when the eyes slowly open, the veil of night lifts and the world appears again. The bed beneath you, the ceiling above, the faint glow of daylight, these arrive like familiar scenery reassembled after a pause. Yet there is a moment, brief but unmistakable, when waking feels uncanny. The mind is not entirely sure where it is. Dreams linger, shadows dissolve, and for a heartbeat you hover between worlds. That fragile interval is more than just grogginess, it is a doorway. Some traditions suggest that how you meet the morning sets the tone for the whole day. In Tibetan practice, there is the habit of asking upon waking, "Am I dreaming this life?" It is not a question of doubt, but of awareness. The thought is simple. If life itself is a kind of Bardo, a rehearsal for the afterlife, then each morning is not merely a continuation, but a rebirth. Waking becomes a reminder to see the day as both real and unreal, both shadow and lesson. Imagine a child opening a new book, the pages crisp, the story unwritten in their experience. That is what waking offers each of us. Yesterday's chapters may carry weight, but today is its own fresh page. A simple witness check. Am I dreaming this life? Plants a seed of perspective. It allows you to see the coming hours not as a heavy march, but as an unfolding scene in a greater curriculum. Rituals can anchor this awareness. Washing the face becomes not just hygiene, but symbolic cleansing, a gentle baptism into the new day. Drinking water is no longer mere thirst quenching, but the first offering of life's flow. The breakfast table, often hurried, can be seen as communion with the body, fueling not just tasks but lessons. These small acts, reframed, become sacred rehearsals, reminding us that the veil between life and afterlife is thin and can be acknowledged even in toast and tea. To make this image gentler, think of an actor backstage before a performance. They adjust their costume, check their script, breathe deeply. These small actions are not just preparation, they are rituals that signal the transition into role. In the same way, our morning acts, stretching, showering, dressing, are small rehearsals for stepping into the role of the day. If life is a stage within the afterlife, then every morning is the moment the curtain rises again. Intention setting can guide this stage. Not a rigid list of achievements, but a quiet compass. Something as simple as, today I will try to notice beauty. Or today I will meet irritation with patience. These are not vows to perfection, but gentle tethers, keeping awareness aligned when distractions pull. Psychologists studying mindfulness note that intention at the start of the day increases the likelihood of acting in line with one's values. Spiritual traditions echo the same. Plant a seed in the morning, and the evening fruit will carry its taste. There is also a softness in recognizing the fragility of mornings. Not every day begins with enthusiasm. Some mornings are heavy, weighted by fatigue or worry. Even here, the witness check can help. Am I dreaming this life? Becomes a reminder that the heaviness itself may be part of the curriculum. Even difficult mornings are chapters, not failures. Meeting them with awareness rather than resistance is itself a lesson. In neuroscience, waking is a marvel. As consciousness returns, brain regions reconnect. Perception knits itself together. David Eagleman reminds us that the present moment is always slightly delayed, constructed from fragments. Waking each morning, then, is not just a return to continuity, but a fresh construction of reality. Your mind rebuilds the world anew, piece by piece, before you rise from bed. If reality is an interface, mornings are when the interface reloads. There is poetry here. Each sunrise is a microcosm of resurrection, a rehearsal for the larger awakening after death. Just as you lay down into darkness and dreams, then rise again to light and life, so too might the soul move through shadow into clarity. If you practice noticing this in the small cycle of the day, perhaps you prepare yourself for the larger cycle of existence. Think of it as tuning an instrument. A violinist does not wait until the concert has begun to adjust the strings. They tune each morning. Life is the same. The day is a symphony you're about to play, and intention is the tuning that brings harmony. Without it, the music may still proceed, but with discord. With it, even mistakes become part of the melody. So as you open your eyes tomorrow, try pausing before rushing to your phone or your tasks. Notice the light filtering in. Ask quietly, am I dreaming this life? Set one gentle intention, however small. Then step into your rituals, washing, eating, walking, with the awareness that these are not chores but sacred cues. Each action is a rehearsal, each moment a reminder that you are already living in the afterlife's classroom, practicing for the larger awakening. And if you forget later in the day, that is all right. The morning will come again, and with it another chance to remember. The curriculum is patient. The veil is forgiving. Each dawn is another beginning, another opportunity to see the dream as dream, and the life within it as practice for eternity. As you move through a day, the world often feels solid, ordinary, predictable. You go to work, answer messages, stand in line for coffee, return home. Yet every so often something interrupts the flow, something so oddly timed that it feels like a whisper from behind the veil. You open a book and find the very phrase you had been struggling to articulate. You turn on the radio and hear a song whose lyrics echo your unspoken mood. You overhear a stranger say the exact words that answer a question you have been holding quietly inside. These moments are often dismissed as coincidence, but to the one experiencing them they feel personal, charged with meaning, like notes slipped through the cracks of reality. Carl Jung called these events synchronicities, meaningful coincidences without apparent cause. His idea was that inner states and outer events can sometimes line up in ways that go beyond chance. Modern researcher Bernard Beitman has studied such experiences and found that they often occur at times of transition, when people are grieving, making big decisions, or standing at the edge of change. It is as though the fabric of life becomes thinner at these times, allowing threads from the unseen pattern to shine through. Think of it like walking through a dense forest. Most of the time the canopy blocks the light and you move in shadow, but every so often the trees part and a shaft of sunlight falls directly on your path, illuminating something you are meant to notice. Synchronicities are like those shafts of light, brief, unexplainable illuminations that feel precisely aimed. In daily life, we often experience them in small ways. You think of an old friend for the first time in years, and within hours you receive a message from them. You're debating whether to take a risk, and you happen to hear 3 separate references to courage in the same day. A book, a podcast, a billboard. Rationally, you could say it is just the mind noticing patterns. Yet emotionally it feels different, as though life itself is speaking. For those who see life as a kind of afterlife classroom, synchronicities take on a special meaning. They are not random accidents, but teaching moments, signs posted along the way. They remind us that the world is interactive, responsive to the inner state of the student. The veil does not only conceal, sometimes it reveals in flashes that we are part of a larger curriculum. Skeptics argue that the human mind is wired to find patterns, and that is true. We are natural meaning makers. But perhaps that is not a flaw but part of the design. If life is intended as a classroom, then the capacity to recognize meaning is the very skill being trained. These signs may be subtle, because part of the lesson is learning how to notice. To make this gentler, imagine playing a video game where the environment sometimes drops hints about what to do next. A flickering light, a sound cue, a path suddenly clear. The hints are not commands but invitations. You can ignore them and still proceed, but if you notice, the journey becomes smoother, more aligned. Synchronicities may be life's way of leaving these hints. Psychologists note that people who pay attention to synchronicities often feel more connected, more guided, even if they cannot explain why. The awareness itself seems to open the heart to wonder. Instead of life being a series of disconnected events, it begins to feel like a conversation. The world speaks, and we respond. The veil is not silent but whispering. This awareness can be cultivated. You can begin each day with a simple openness. I will notice what speaks to me today. Not with paranoia, not searching for secret codes in every license plate, but with curiosity. When something stands out, an overheard phrase, an unexpected meeting, a repetition, you pause and reflect. What might this be pointing toward? The answer may not be clear, but the act of noticing itself makes life feel more spacious, more luminous. There is also humility in this practice. Not every coincidence is meaningful, and not every sign is obvious. The point is not to control the messages, but to remain receptive. In the same way that dreams can be both random and revealing, synchronicities can be both ordinary and profound. The practice is to stay awake enough to tell the difference, or at least to hold the question gently. Many people who have had near-death experiences report that after their return, synchronicities multiplied. They felt as though life was guiding them with a subtler hand, arranging encounters and events to keep them on track. Whether or not that is literally true, the shift in perception was undeniable. They began to live as though each moment might carry hidden meaning, and in living that way, meaning appeared more often. So tonight, as you listen, think back on your own life. Have there been moments when the world seemed to line up just for you? Times when the right person arrived at the right moment, when words echoed across different sources, when chance felt like guidance? Perhaps those were not accidents, but signs along the way, reminders that you're already in the afterlife classroom, already in dialogue with the veil. As you drift towards sleep, imagine tomorrow unfolding with such signs woven through. You may not recognize them all, but they will be there. Shafts of light on the path, whispers in the noise, invitations to notice. Life, like the afterlife, may already be speaking in coincidences that are not coincidences at all. When the day comes to its quiet close, there is a pause that feels different from any other. The tasks are finished, the light softens, and the body leans toward rest. In that moment, before drifting into sleep, you stand at a threshold as real as any doorway, for sleep itself is a rehearsal, a nightly descent into a state where the self loosens, memories blur, and awareness steps aside. Ancient traditions often spoke of sleep as a little death, a practice run for the greater passage. And just as the afterlife is said to include a review of life, so too can each day end with a review. A lantern-lit theatre where the hours just lived are replayed in miniature. Imagine sitting in a small quiet hall, lit only by a single lantern. On the stage, actors perform scenes from your own day. You see yourself waking, walking, speaking, laughing, frowning. Each action is simple, yet watching it now from a little distance, you notice details you missed. The tone of your voice in a conversation, the look in someone's eyes after your comment, the ripple of your mood as it touched others. This is the essence of the evening review. Not judgment, not analysis, but seeing with gentle clarity. Psychologists sometimes recommend journaling at night, listing the day's events or emotions. The spiritual parallel goes deeper, reviewing not just what happened but what you passed along emotionally. Did your presence lighten or darken the spaces you entered? Did you offer warmth or did you spread frustration? The evening review is a mirror held up to the soul, not to criticize but to illuminate. Near-death experiences often include a panoramic life review, where every moment is seen and felt. By practicing a daily reflection, you rehearse for that greater review, softening its lessons into smaller, manageable pieces. Instead of waiting until the end to understand your impact, you glimpse it each night, adjusting gently, correcting course, learning in increments. The benefits are subtle but profound. A sharp word spoken in haste can be noticed, felt from the other side, and softened in memory. Tomorrow you may speak with more care. A kindness you barely registered in the moment may return in the review as a moment of unexpected light, encouraging you to continue. Slowly, day by day, the soul grows not through perfection but through attention. To make this gentler, think of polishing a piece of wood. Each night you pass the cloth over it, smoothing a little more, removing a little roughness. The wood was never broken, but with care it shines. Life, reviewed each evening, becomes like that. A surface slowly refined, not by force, but by patient attention. There is also a neurological dimension. Sleep researchers note that the brain consolidates memory during rest, sorting events, strengthening some, fading others. By reflecting before sleep, you influence this process, guiding what the brain will emphasize. It is as though you hand the sleeping mind a script. These are the lessons. These are the moments to keep. In this way, the evening review is not only spiritual but biological, shaping how memory becomes part of identity. The practice need not be long. A few minutes of quiet attention is enough. Sit, breathe, let the day play back in images. Notice what stands out. Do not argue with it. Do not excuse it. Simply witness. Some nights you may feel regret. Other nights you may feel gratitude. Both are teachers. The point is not perfection, but awareness. The same awareness said to be present in the afterlife life review. Think of it also as planting seeds for sleep. Instead of drifting into unconsciousness with unresolved agitation, you enter the night with clarity. Sleep becomes not escape, but integration, a rehearsal for the greater letting go. Just as a musician practices scales to prepare for performance, so too does the evening review prepare the soul for the final review, where every scale becomes a song. This perspective transforms the ordinary rhythm of life. Morning becomes a birth, the day a lesson, evening a rehearsal for death, and night a return to the mystery. Each cycle mirrors the larger arc of existence, and within it, the evening review is the bridge, the pause of reflection that connects effort with rest, action with meaning. So tonight, before closing your eyes, imagine lighting a small lantern in your heart. Let the day's scenes appear on its gentle stage. Watch yourself not with harshness, but with curiosity. Notice where you gave light and where you withheld it. Notice how the ripples of your choices touched others. Then, with a breath, let it all go, trusting that tomorrow will bring new chances to learn. In this way, you practice living in the afterlife already, reviewing, learning, softening, one day at a time. When we think of ethics, we often imagine rules written in books, commandments carved in stone, or laws debated in courts. Yet if life itself is an afterlife-like classroom, then ethics may not be external rules at all. They may be woven directly into the fabric of experience. Every encounter becomes a lesson. Every face is a mirror. Every moment carries the quiet question, what did I give? What did I take? What did I learn? Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who spent a career with the dying, wrote that at the end of life, people do not ask how much they earned, how famous they became, or how many possessions they gathered. They ask only, did I love? Was I loved? Raymond Moody, who who documented near-death experiences found the same refrain in life reviews. What mattered was not success, but connection. Not brilliance, but kindness. Not achievement, but love. This is cosmic ethics. The recognition that everyone we meet is both student and teacher, both mirror and lesson. The cashier at the grocery store who seems distracted teaches us patience. The bus driver who smiles when we enter reminds us of the power of small gestures. The child asking endless questions pulls us back to curiosity. The difficult colleague shows us where our compassion still falters. No encounter is wasted. Each one is part of the curriculum. Think of it like walking through a hall of teachers. Some lecture, some whisper, some test you harshly, some encourage softly. You may not recognize them as teachers in the moment, but when you look back you see that each encounter shaped you. The cosmic classroom is not elsewhere. It is here, in the daily rhythm of lives brushing against one another. This way of seeing transforms the ordinary. The stranger who cuts you off in traffic is no longer just an annoyance but a lesson in forgiveness. The friend who listens when you are weary is not just comfort, but a living demonstration of compassion. The child who throws a tantrum in the store is not just noise, but an invitation to practice empathy. Life becomes less a series of interruptions and more a series of teachings, each one tailor-made to reveal where we still need to grow. Skeptics might say this is wishful thinking, that people are just people, coincidences are just coincidences, and interactions are random. Yet the perspective itself changes everything. To see everyone as teacher is to soften judgment, to open to meaning, to engage life as a dialogue. Even if the randomness remains, the experience becomes richer, more luminous. In spiritual traditions, this idea appears again and again. Jesus taught that what you do to the least of others, you do to him. The Buddha taught that all beings are interdependent, each encounter a reflection of one's own mind. Hindu thought frames life as lila, divine play, where every actor is both mask and revelation. Different cultures, same truth. The sacred speaks through everyone, not only saints and sages, but also through the ordinary people who pass unnoticed. To make this gentler, think of walking through a garden. Each flower, each tree, each stone has something to teach. The rose about beauty, the thorn about caution, the oak about endurance, the moss about softness. None is wasted. Life's encounters are like that garden. Some nourish, some challenge, some comfort, some sting. All contribute to the learning of the soul. In practice, cosmic ethics means living as though love is the currency of the afterlife. Not sentimental love, but the simple recognition of connection. Every act of kindness enriches both giver and receiver. Every act of cruelty diminishes both. The life review described in near-death experiences makes this literal. You feel what you gave, for good or ill. Knowing this, the veil is already transparent. The afterlife is not waiting. It is shaping ethics here and now. This perspective also softens the fear of failure. If every encounter is a lesson, then mistakes are not the end. They are part of the teaching. The harsh word spoken can become tomorrow's reminder to soften. The failure to help can become the next chance to notice. Ethics is not a courtroom but a classroom. The point is not perfection, but learning. And in this classroom, the curriculum is love. Not love as grand gestures, but love as daily presence. Holding the door, listening with attention, offering patience in traffic, smiling at the stranger. These small acts accumulate like drops of water, shaping the riverbed of the soul. At the end, they are what remain. So tonight, as you listen, you might reflect on the teachers you met today. Who challenged your patience? Who reminded you of kindness? Who drew out your better self? Who showed you where you still stumble? Each one is part of your afterlife curriculum, teaching through presence whether they knew it or not. And perhaps, in turn, you were a teacher for them. Perhaps your glance, your words, your silence. Your smile carried ripples you may never see. Perhaps you too were part of their curriculum. Life is like that, an endless weaving of lessons, each of us both student and teacher, learning and teaching love. When we think of commencement, we often imagine graduates in robes, stepping out into the world after years of learning. Commencement is not only an ending, but a beginning. The close of one chapter and the opening of another. In the same way, many traditions suggest that death is not finality but commencement, the gentle graduation from the curriculum of life into a wider awareness. Throughout this exploration, we have wandered through mirrors ancient and modern. The Tibetan Bardo reminding us that confusion comes from not recognizing the nature of mind. The Egyptian Duat describing earthly life as shadows of a greater light. Gnostic gospels that urged resurrection while alive. Plato's cave, where shadows flicker on the wall waiting to be seen through. Even Wheeler's It from Bit, suggesting reality itself may be informational projection. Each tradition, in its own voice, hinted that the world we know may not be ultimate but preparatory. Science too offered windows. Donald Hoffman spoke of perception as a user interface, icons rather than reality itself. Quantum experiments revealed a participatory universe, rendering itself when observed. Neuroscience showed how memory rewrites itself, how perception lags behind reality, how the interpreter spins stories while the witness quietly observes. Near-death studies brought stories of tunnels, lights, presences and life reviews, accounts that seemed less like hallucination and more like rehearsals for awakening. Through all of this ran one theme, that life itself is already afterlife-like, already a training ground, already a rehearsal. We are not waiting for the afterlife, we are living in it, learning through its shadows, preparing to graduate into clearer light. The life review described by survivors of near-death experiences is often spoken of with awe. Every action, every word, every thought relived, but from both sides, from the self and from the other. Ethics becomes empathy, not commandment. What we gave or withheld becomes our own experience. From this perspective, the curriculum of life is simple but vast. Learn to love, to connect, to awaken to the fact that the veil itself is thin. The forgetting that shapes life is not punishment, but protection. Without forgetting, the lessons would lose their weight. With forgetting, courage and compassion become authentic. Each morning, waking is rebirth. Each evening, review is rehearsal. Each encounter, whether with friend or stranger, becomes a teaching, and each synchronicity is a hint that the veil is not solid but porous, whispering reminders from beyond. At the end, when the curriculum is complete, death may come not as exile, but as commencement. The veil lifts, the stage play ends, and the actors remember their true names. The traveller who felt homesick all life long finally recognises the city lights on the horizon. The student who laboured through lessons sees at last the purpose of the struggle. The dreamer who mistook shadows for reality awakens into clarity. For some, this thought brings fear, the unknown, the dissolution, the end of self. Yet what we have seen suggests another possibility, that the self which dissolves is only the interpreter, the temporary role, while the witness remains. Meditation, music, service, moments of wonder, these already give glimpses of that witness. Death may be less a leap into nothing, and more a settling fully into that space which has always been there. To make this gentler, think of finishing a book you have loved. The story carried you through laughter, struggle, suspense. You turn the last page and part of you is sad to let go. Yet another part feels complete, satisfied, ready to carry the lessons into whatever comes next. Death may be like that. The last page of this chapter, the commencement of a larger story. What then should we carry with us as we live? The testimonies of the dying, the accounts of those who touched the edge, The whispers of traditions and the findings of science all converge on a single answer. What matters is not how much you own or how far you travel. What matters is how you love, how you give, how you recognize the sacred in the ordinary. Each gesture ripples outward, and in the end, you will feel those ripples as your own. So perhaps we are already in the afterlife, and the task is not to wait, but to live it consciously. To see mornings as rebirths, evenings as rehearsals, encounters as teachings, synchronicities as signs. To practice love in small ways, so that when commencement comes, we recognize it not as strange but as familiar, and when it does come, quietly, gently, as it will for each of us, we may find that we are not stepping into darkness but into clarity, not into exile but into home, not into ending but into commencement. The veil lifts, the light grows, and we remember what we had forgotten, that the afterlife was never separate. It was always here, threaded through each moment, teaching us how to awaken. So rest tonight with that thought. Life is already part of eternity. Death is not departure, but graduation. And love in all its forms is the diploma we carry forward,